Welcome to the One More Thing podcast. I'm Troy, and today I'm joined with Pastor Larry.
Good morning.
Hey. Man, it's been a busy weekend here at Suncoast. A lot of things happening in the course of just a few days. 425 students showing up to our Escape the Woods, which was an amazing sort of event for our community. And I was blown. I'm still kind of tired. I'm trying to gather my thoughts. But then we're in week 2 of our whole Notifications On series. Last week was about procrastination, and this week was all about money.
Right.
That's a taboo topic these days in churches. What sparked the interest in going forward? Because we don't pass a plate here at Suncoast, and so money's one of those things where you don't hear a lot from us asking for money, and I'm going to ask you some questions about that as well. But why the need to turn notifications on for our finances?
Well, I think it's I do a lot of budgeting in my role as a lead pastor, setting the budget for the church. Also, with the school, I have a connection, and I try to help with their budgeting every year, which is even a more significant budget. Working with a senior living facility, there's budgeting that happens. And I have friends who are CPAs and accountants, and I've been a money guy. By that I mean I'm a guy that counts my pennies.
Yep.
And I have been that way my life. I went to school not only as a pastoral major, theology major, but also as a business major. So I've taken all the classes, including some accounting and different things. So I think that it's important that we monitor our resources in a good way, and we should not let ourselves get overwhelmed by financial difficulties.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that a lot in people's lives, and the teaching was more about lack of planning than anything else.
That's right on. One of the things that you talked about was this idea, and it's a theological construct around finances, what Jesus may call like our treasure or whatever. But you said, quoting from Scripture, it said something along the line, the borrower is always going to be a slave to the lender. Can you clarify that for us? Like, when you hear the word slave, a lot of times it seems like there's an overlord, but that's sometimes how finances work. We become slave to that way of living. And so explain that verse to us and that first point you made.
I think that with consumer debt, by that I mean the stuff that people charge on their credit cards, then all of a sudden they get overwhelmed, and the company says, hey, we'll give you 1 year interest, no interest if you buy these appliances from Lowe's or Home Depot or wherever. But if you don't pay that off after a year, they back charge you all the interest. And all of a sudden you're paying, if you've made a $1,000 purchase, you may pay $200 more on that purchase or more than that, because you didn't read the fine print or you didn't follow through with what you should do. It's about being good good stewards of our resources. We should not fret about our resources, but we do. And the problem is not what we earn, it's what we spend. So really, to get to the spending, and when I talk to people about money, what I'm really asking you is, do you have a plan for your life? And do you have a plan for your spending? Do you spend frivolously? So many people who are in marriage difficulty, it's because of finance.
Yep.
So how do we help you live a more joy-sustained life? There's some simple principles that if you apply these to your life, it'll help your stress, it'll help your planning, it'll help your marriage. It seems to work in all other areas. I get frustrated when someone comes to me and says, can you help my mother? And I go, well, dude, you make $200,000 a year, and you're asking the church to help your mother. Why? Well, because I have a new boat, and I have a new house, and I have a new car, but I've spent all my margin income on me.
Yes.
And I can't even help my mother. So we want to help people like that to understand, everyone needs a little financial margin, primarily so you can help those that you love around you, or if you have an emergency or a crisis in your family, it's not a second or coupled, it's not doubled by the fact you don't have the money to pay for it.
Yeah.
And for some people, I need a new battery, it's a crisis. I need a new tire, it's a crisis. And I go, seriously, we can do better.
Yeah.
And these are very practical teachings about practical areas of our lives. And notice it's not about give us your money.
That's right.
What we hear a lot in church is, hey, we're going to talk to you about, it's not God or money, but give us your money.
That's right.
And it's kind of an interesting thing. But like you said, Suncoast does not pass the offering plates. We're a church that if I have your heart and your resources are in order, when there is a time for you to give, you can be generous in that in that aspect as well.
And that seems to have always been your heart for the community, because some churches take an awful amount of time in their sermons to give room for the offering where the plate is passed or whatever. Like, we have people who actually ask, where do I give?
Right.
Where do I give? And for me, that's a huge statement to your ability as a leader to be financially responsible for your entire staff and the church and the resources that God has trusted us with.
Right.
But there was a point in the sermon where you address the cultural issue of consumerism and how it seems to be antithetical to truly following Christ. And that was one of the few times I've heard you, not that you were aggressive about it, but you were pretty adamant about, like, there is a culture that exists that demands of you to keep up with the Joneses, so to speak.
Right.
And you spoke against that. Like, what is it in this culture that you see happening? Because you compared it to just 10 years ago, how much debt we have now and why divorce is happening 54% because of finances. What is it about the current state of cultural consumerism that's causing us to fall into that trap of becoming enslaved to overpaying for things in terms of, like, how much interest? Because what is it? $14,000 the average American has.
Right.
And if I make a minimum payment on that card, it's going to take me 20 years, 25 years to get out of that debt.
Right. Yeah. I think it's sad. And it is a state of our culture. So what I think it gives us an opportunity to focus people's lives. Where is your true value? And if it's a bigger house, bigger car, bigger boat, all the toys in life that we enjoy, and you don't have enough resource to pay for that and still have margin to give, I don't have any problem with somebody having a boat.
Right.
I think it's great. But my question is, are you generous with what you have?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not, then you need to rethink some of your priorities. I love it when someone comes to me and says, Pastor, pray that I hit the lottery. And I go, if my prayers could get the lottery to be hit, I'd pray for myself.
That's
and
right.
I'd buy a ticket. But God doesn't want what we don't have.
Yeah.
He gives us a certain amount of resources to be good stewards. And I'm a good steward when I don't give the banks all this interest, when I pay my bills on time and in full, and when I also have enough to where I'm able to share with people who really are needy.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of discernment too, because, Pastor, I drive a nice Jaguar, and my wife's Lexus is 5 years old. We need to get her a better car. Well, that's not probably in my area that I'm really going to help somebody like that.
Right.
But I do think that when we can help people who are walking begin to ride, we can help people who are struggling begin to find their way a little better. When I use the analogy of swimming, some people, they swimming and they're fighting to stay on top of the water, and a storm happens like Ian, or a storm happens like a medical issue, and they go underwater for a little while, and they're not completely drowning, but they're gasping for air.
Yeah.
And we want to give them a little help, and they come back to the surface and they swim.
Mm-hmm.
That's the perfect scenario. There are others who come to us that are swimming on the bottom. They've been swimming on the bottom for years.
Yeah.
And they're never going to get off the bottom. And there's no way we can get them off the bottom.
That's right.
But we want to help them a little bit, but realizing that we're never going to help them get out of the issue they're in. If somebody comes to me and says, I'm $10,000 in credit card debt. Can you get me out of credit card debt? The answer is going to be probably not.
Right.
But if you come to me and say, I really need $25 for groceries this week, well, we want to help with that. That's where we, feed and food is so much more important than some of the other things.
And I love hearing the stories about the vehicles we give away. Like, in the last 3 weeks, we've given away 5 vehicles.
Right.
And that's due to that part of our community who are actively giving.
Right.
And that's sort of a question you ask is, would I rather pay $300 in interest on a particular loan, or have that money available to use to serve my community? And there's something about being able to give, right? Because, again, I love what you say. It's God's not asking anything of you that you don't have, but
Right.
He is asking, what are you going to do with what you do have? What is it about the heart of Suncoast to where we're driven to serve our community? Like, we're driven to give back. I mean, is that just part of our theological DNA? Is that just part of like a practical aspect of your heart? Like, what is it?
Yes.
Yes, all the above.
All the above. I think it is part of the theology. I mean, we tell people we're followers of the teachings of Jesus, and he's very clear throughout the New Testament talking about those who don't have. The widow with 2 mites, she gave all she had.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus is more interested about your heart than he is about your money, but he talks a lot about money.
Yeah.
But you can't serve 2 masters. In other words, you can't live in 2 worldviews. The one worldview is possessions and acquisition. The other worldview is generosity and giving things away. Well, those are contrary. So I don't think you can accumulate everything you want and give away everything you want.
Yeah.
I just don't think it works that way. But I think as you give away, you realize the true accumulation in life is the satisfaction of helping people when they need it. And sometimes, someone said, but if you do that, don't you get taken advantage of sometimes? And I go, sometimes.
Yep.
We do. But Susan, who does this for us, she's got that southern drawl. Now, sweetheart, we're not going to do that.
That's right.
But has she been duped? A few times, but rarely.
Yeah.
She's very good at what she does, and she knows what she's doing. And after you deal with a certain mentality for a while, you can find those who are trying to con you or the smoke screen. You can kind of see right through
That's
it.
right.
She does very well, but we still want to help people, even if occasionally we're duped.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't have given this person exactly that. I still go, but we're still going to do the best we can to always be generous to other people, because that's what Christ has taught us, and I think it's a good lesson of life.
That's awesome. The last thing I want to say is there seems to be this growing interest in Suncoast, in what we're doing here and what we're teaching here. And I know Kevin has sent me quite a few emails from people who've been watching online or have visited, and they have these questions. So I have to say thanks, because you answered a lot of that in the last part of your sermon, where you made this beautiful segue from, there's a slave mentality that we often have, and you situated it very nicely in finances, but then you segued into the idea of being enslaved to a particular idea about God, like
Right.
limiting God. And if no one heard that before, you answered some really big questions about Suncoast's theology and as it pertains to what we teach here. And so I just wanted a few moments to recap that, because that was really amazing the way you did that segue. And for the listening audience, and again, with the growing interest in Suncoast, and we're seeing our numbers grow each and every week, new families coming, there's something to what you said that I think is resonating in the hearts of people, that they want to throw off those shackles of old religion where God is viewed a particular way. And so what did you say?
Well, basically, I said that for me, I had a belief system that in God was an angry deity that needed to be satisfied with some blood, or all of humanity was going to burn in hell forever. Mm-hmm. And that's what I grew up understanding. Then one day I began to see God through a different lens. God is not an angry deity who requires blood. That's a very ancient concept in many religions. Mm-hmm. There used to be, the old ancient Greek or early movies, they'd show some virgin in a white dress being sacrificed to some god,
right?
Some ancient, and that's kind of the way it is. But that mentality needs to be left in the past. It's not who God is today. So who is God today? He's not some ancient deity who has this wrath against humanity. He is the very essence of life, who lives in us and through us. Every breath I breathe is a breath of grace, because life itself comes from God. And when God is in me and he dwells in me and I'm his kid, and no matter who the person is in our community, they're his kids too.
Yep.
It's just a different way of understanding who God is, and it's a better, more healthy understanding of God. Why would we let ancient peoples with ancient religious concepts, why can't we move away from those
Yeah.
to a more healthy understanding of who God really is. And it's not just me. There are many today that are seeing God through a different lens. If not, then the concept of God is so flawed and so damaging. Christianity is taking it's taking the elevator down to the exit to where you're going to get there. There's no growth for the future.
Yeah.
We've seen it happen in Europe, and part of it's just the fallacy of that kind of Christianity.
Yeah.
So we come out of that heritage. You and I both did.
Yeah.
A very fundamentalist, conservative approach, and now we're saying, but there's so much. There's so much better way to view God, to where people can say, I could embrace that God.
Yeah.
But their concept. I talk to people who claim to be atheists. I'm an atheist, and I go, why? Well, I just don't believe in God. Well, define the God you don't believe in.
Yeah.
And they define him, and I go, that's amazing. I'm an atheist too, if that's God.
That's right.
But when you define God differently, this concept of religious life and spiritual life and inward journey becomes so much more viable to health and wholeness and community. And I think that's where we are. And we may be the front edge of that wave, but I'm glad there's a wave. And I'm glad we're there, because I think it's the best place for us to be.
Yeah. There's a freedom in that. In the same way you talked about financial freedom, there's a freedom that comes with understanding God that way. And I thought that was a really beautiful analogy and segue in there.
Yeah.
So this week is time management.
That's right. And so I'm anxious to hear what you have to say about that.
I'm going to say what St. Augustine said about time. I understand it until I start trying to talk about it. And so, I've got a good base to start with, but I think it's going to be really helpful for people and really impactful. And we talk about time and what we value. So,
and I think the point of this whole series, turn the notifications on, quit procrastinating, make sure that I'm a good steward of my resources, including time.
That's right.
I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about that.
Can't wait.
Me too.
Dr. Baucom, thanks for being with us, man.
My pleasure.